Yellow and Red Mix by Digits 27, Chapter 59. Naruto almost skipped over to where Fu lay panting on the ground, just barely supporting herself with her forearms. She was looking up at him with a glare while he just smiled back, as jovial as if they were just having some siblings bonding time. In a sense, they were. Come on, Fu, you know you have to try harder than that. The younger girl's glare doubled in intensity as she tried to set Naruto on fire, just using her mind. Shut up, Oni-san. You know I've never beaten you in a spar. Naruto knelt down so their faces were only a few inches apart, and with that attitude, you never will. Fu tried to strike Naruto at that moment, bringing her legs around in a sweeping kick to knock him off of his feet. However, Naruto jumped over the fast, but not fast enough attack, and swiftly delivered a light kick to Fu's stomach, sending her skidding across the dusty training ground. She groaned as she returned to nursing her various wounds, mostly so superficial as Naruto didn't actually want to hurt her, but they were still debilitating. Come on, Imoto. I think you've had enough. We'll go get something to eat so you can get your strength back. Fu seemed ready to protest. He should have known, considering her drive to outdo him. But he just leveled a stare that told her it wasn't optional. He sighed, nodded, and slowly stood up with some help from her brother. Once again, she tried to take advantage of his guard being down by flipping him. Except Naruto's guard was never down, and he inverted the motion, somehow pulling Fu into his back in the process. Now, Fu, that wasn't very nice. The main character teen just coughed, but still gladly snuggled into her brother's back, reminded of all the times he would carry her during the training trip. Hey, Oni-san, you seem extra happy today. What happened? Naruto could only chuckle. It was true that a smile hadn't dropped from his face for the last few days, even when sparring with Fu. Maybe I'll tell you when you're older. Fu pouted, but still only tiredly nodded. Naruto could be a real taskmaster when he was training, and even the training regimen he set her was nothing compared to the one he put himself through. Ever since his humiliating defeat by Kisame, he had nearly doubled his training, setting a grueling pace that pushed him every day. Even now, as he carried Fu off to a nearby stall, he had clones working on various techniques, no longer caring about the pain of receiving the memories. Even made him stronger. Likewise, he was wearing a large weights on his back for as long as it was safe and wouldn't damage his body. Fu knew her brother didn't take defeat very well, but even for him, this was ridiculous. It was the kind of training that would kill people without his healing factor and QB to help deal with the strain of the extra memories. He jogged over to a nearby okonomiyaki cart, setting food down on the seat, much to her displeasure at being taken off of his back, before plopping himself down in the seat next to her. To his surprise, they weren't there for very long before Yukimaru ducked under the flaps. He took one look at Fu, blushed, and attempted to leave him. Hey, Yukimaru! Both of the younger teens froze. Fu because she hadn't noticed the other boy enter, and Yukimaru because he was caught. He turned shyly, waving at Naruto and Fu, still with a small blush adorning his cheeks. Hi, Naruto. Hi, Fu. Naruto smiled broadly. This was just too good an opportunity to miss for teasing. Hey, Yukimaru, why don't you join us? The okonomiyaki's on me. Yukimaru tried to say no, thinking of a plausible reason why he had to leave. However, not finding any, he was forced to sigh and sit next to Fu. Naruto had made sure it was the only available seat remaining. So, how are you doing, Yukimaru? I haven't really had that much time to see you. Settling in too soon? Well, the younger boy nodded, not turning around in case he accidentally caught Fu's eyes. There had been having a lot of awkward moments lately when that happened. Gordon is really liking it. She says it's good to finally be somewhere where we can just be left alone to do our own things. Naruto nodded with the same fond smile that hadn't left his features since he and Taiya finally went to the next level in their relationship. What about you, Fu? You making sure Yukimaru is settling in well? He could only laugh at the expression of utter embarrassment and annoyance that crossed over Fu's features at the same time. Oni-san! Naruto just rubbed her firmly on the back as he stood up from the cart and ducked under the flaps. Well, I wouldn't want to come in between you two. Have fun without me and try not to do anything me and Taiya wouldn't do. Fu once again let her head drop to the counter of the card in embarrassment, and Shikamaru did the same thing in a more reserved way. Naruto chuckled as he walked off. Fu's training could always come later. Moments for perfect instant only came so often. He immediately hopped up onto a roof, trying to think where Toyo might be, and if that failed, he would head over to see Gaara. Unfortunately, at that moment, there was an enormous explosion from the center of the village. The large cloud of smoke rising into the air. Naruto spun to look at it, narrowing his eyes as he recognized the telltale signs of summoning. Wondering what was going on, he dashed over, suddenly bounding across the entire rooftops in stride as he rushed to the center of the village. By the time he was on a high rooftop overlooking the square, were many merchants who flocked their goods. The massive clouds of smoke and dust hadn't dissipated. Naruto tried to pierce through, but it was impenetrable. He heard a huff, he heard a scuffle, the sound of metal striking metal before he tensed. A sharp wave emerged from the dust, flying right at him. He had a kunai at the ready, but was shocked when a young girl flew out of the smoke, crashing into him. He looked down only to grimace at what he saw. The girl was badly wounded. A large gash ran up her torso, looking like some kind of animal attacks, and she was already dead. There was nothing he could do for her except gently lay her down on the roof and close her eyes. His hands balled up into fist, and a snarl made its way onto his face, demanding to know who did this. He leapt down to the ground, making a small crater as he landed from the weight he was carrying. He angrily glared out to the dust and smoke until it cleared enough to show a single figure, a short orange-haired man with his hair in a ponytail. He had the slashed forehead protector of Amegakure and wore the robes of the Katsuki as he stood still, staring across at Naruto. Immediately, the blonde noticed the man's strange eyes, a light gray with concentrating ripples moving out from the pupil. Who are you? The stoic man didn't move, staring down Naruto with his strange eyes. As the dust cleared, some more, Naruto was shocked to see an enormous pair of centipedes. Their bodies black and orange. They too bore the man's odd eye pattern and were staring at him with equal intensity. Naruto, Uzumaki, Namikaze. Naruto's knuckles were white now. This could only be one man, the leader of the Akatsuki. Pain. I haven't decided on it yet. If the man was bothered by the half-hearted joke, he didn't show on his expressionless face. Instead, he merely stood there as the two centipedes rushed Naruto, moving surprisingly fast to their many legs. The creatures were huge, and were barely down on Naruto fast. So he quickly created a clone, and both clutched their wrist. When the ball of energy had formed, Naruto rushed forward to meet the creatures. The four of them met with a shriek and a large release of energy. More moments later, and the Narutos were left standing. The two centipedes disappeared in a flash of smoke. Is that all you've got, Pain? The orange-haired man continued to stand impassively, nonplussed by the destruction of his summons. However, both looked around when the wind began to pick up around the two of them. The sand on the ground spinning madly until it slowly coalesced into the form of an increasingly angry Gaara. Without a single word, he raised his hand, and the sand around Pain fluctuating dangerously before covering the man in an instant. There was no mercy in Gaara's pale eyes as he stared at the floating mass of sand that housed the leader of the Katsuki. Sound bear! Before he could pass his judgment, the sand exploded outwards, surprising both Gaara and Naruto as they watched the large rhino suddenly appear in a burst of smoke. Before either reacted, it was already charging them down. It met a wall of dense sand, but not before it released a roar, spearing the sand with its enormous horn. Gaara blinked as he felt the tip of the horn graze his throat before his hand twisted, and the entire creature was blasted backwards, returning to the smoke that had heralded its arrival. Again, Pain seemed entirely uncaring that both his summons had been so easily defeated, staring at both Naruto and the Kasukage impassively. The Ichibi. Gaara narrowed his eyes at the man, already having come to the conclusion that Naruto had. Without any hint of hand signs, there was another burst of smoke. When it cleared, they could both see the form of an ox, its body riddled with various piercings, similar again to those that covered Pain himself. The only other difference was that this ox was about the size of a building, and it started straight at them. To charge at the duo, its horns were brought low to skewer the two of them, even as they began to move away. Grand bass drop. Both turned in time to see a small red comet suddenly descend on the ox, trailing a stream of lightning behind it before impacting the ox's head. It tried to turn in time to meet the new arrival, but it was already too late. In the blow that would shatter a small building, the deer crashed straight into its head. The shockwave destroyed more than a few windows in the area as it released a sound that made even Pain cringe a little. The results were undeniable. In a moment of obvious pain for the ox, its head caved in, causing it to vanish seconds later. Tia joined them on the ground a moment later, watching Pain with a critical eye. That fucker Pain then! Both Gaara and Naruto nodded, tense as they waited for the next attack. Instead, Pain just continued to stand there as if waiting for something. It came in the form of a small green blur, shooting down from the sky, calmly as if he were catching a ball thrown by a child. Pain raised his arm, Fu apparently in his grasp a moment later, surprise evident on her face before she winced as Pain began closing his hand around her throat. He turned his head, looking directly into her eyes, with his strange rippled pair. The Nanami! Convenient! His eyes opened a little wider as suddenly Naruto appeared in front of him, coat removed and his fist cocked back, fury blaring across his face. Let Fu go! His fist impacted on Pain's face, momentarily contorting it before the orange-haired man was sent flying backwards, impacting with the wall of a nearby building. Fu dropped to the ground, clutching at her throat as she gasped in breaths. Moments after Gaara and Yu were there, checking both of them were okay. Fu stood up shakingly, assuring them that she was alright before all four of them turned to where Pain removed himself from the wall, brushing off the rubble like it wasn't there. I see you're going to make this difficult. Naruto growled as the sands began to pick up and electricity began arcing off of Tayu's staff dangerously. Pain merely stood up, putting his hands through a few seals before he was surrounded by a multitude of people. They all bore the same eyes, and all but one shared his orange hair color, each also carrying many piercings with the same black metal. The four shinobi looked across at all the new arrivals in the Akatsuki robes. All of them shocked him. Oh great, now who the hell are these assholes? None of them could answer as they stared at the six men across from them, all of whom stared right back. There was a light gust of wind that blew between the two groups before Naruto suddenly disappeared. He dematerialized inches away from one of them, a taller one with spiky orange hair, not dissimilar from how his used to be when he was younger. His face was cocked back, but inches from touching his face, it froze as if striking an invincible barrier. Tensei. Naruto's eyes opened wider in shock as he was blasted backwards at impossible speeds, never having been touched once. Yu and Fu could only watch on in shock as he went sailing past them, drawing out a massive crater in the street. When he finally landed on the ground, there was a moment as time paused before Yu and Fu darted forward simultaneously. Fu going for the original man, while Yu aimed for the tallest of the group, a man with his orange hair in long bangs that reached down his chest. The rest of the Akatsuki members would have helped their companions if walls of sand hadn't sprung up around them. The one who Naruto had attacked them merely stood calm. The sand bursting before he could cover him. Likewise, the largest of the group held up his hands, and the sand around him fell lifeless to the floor. However, the remaining two, a rugged-looking man and a slightly crazed man wearing a beige shawl, could do nothing as sand whips knocked them off their feet. It brought Naruto enough time to stand up groggily and see Yu firmly smack her staff into her target, sending the man up and over the building, into which Yu quickly followed. He would have followed her, but at that moment, the one with the shawl appeared in front of him. Naruto went to slide under the man's leg, but out of nowhere, a third arm flew out from his robes, catching Naruto even as he slid underneath his legs. He picked him up and heavily tossed him across the clearing. To once again skid down an adjacent street. With a smile reminiscent of Hidan, the man chased after him and quickly followed by the man Naruto had originally tried to attack him. At this point, Fu had reached her target, the one she believed to be the leader of this group, the first one to have appeared, and she was still sore about him catching her so easily and wanted some payback in the form of her reared back fist. Unfortunately, while faster for somebody her age, this man proved to be faster. He caught her fist, quickly averted it to one side before doing something similar with her follow-up attack. For a moment, she realized that he had just moved above both her arms out to either side, but before they could correct the large gap in her guard, the man thrust both hands out, catching her in the stomach. She was then flailing back, making almost as deep a trench as Naruto had moments ago. She tried to get to her feet, but the man was already next to her, lifting her up by her hair before painfully swinging her around once, releasing her so that she soared through the air. Before she could hit anything, her wings burst out of her back, flapping rapidly to reorientate herself to the ground. As soon as she did so, she saw a massive bird-like creature suddenly appear, flying after her. Her eyes open wide as she took off, darting through the sky as she tried to evade the bird. It summoned her visible in its open mouth that left Gar in the clearing with the large man and the more rugged man. The three of them standing in the ruined square, eyeing each other carefully. Gar had seen what the other one did to his hand when it had got too close, so without even moving, he tried to crush his second opponent. However, the heavy-set man was faster, and he appeared, diving in front of his companion, almost arms outstretched, as he seemingly absorbed the chakra right out of the sand. Gar observed them again, noting their identical eyes and similar piercings. Interesting. Taiyo smiled happily as she cracked off blow after blow on the strange orange-haired man in front of her, not really caring that her blows seemed to be doing minimal damage. The man was fast, but with Taiyo's improvised swift release that she had been working on, she was more than able to keep up. Her staff sung as the lightning chakra that tore through the air, leaving nothing but a bright blur as she hit him over and over. Each time the man would block with an open palm, not even wincing, but that seemed to be all he could do. Unfortunately, she grew a bit overconfident, attempting a wide sweeping blow she hoped would hit him in the side. He dug through it, striking the staff at the last moment with unexpected force, which nearly spun her on the spot. As it was, she kept her feet rooted, but suddenly found her staff out to one side, her guard completely open. The man lashed with a hand firmly clasped on top of her head. Time seemed to slow for the girl as around her the color drained from the world. Everything became fuzzy as she felt all the energy leak out of her body. It was like every ounce of happiness was being leached from her form, leaving her an empty husk. All she could do was look into the strange rippling eyes of the orange-haired man, and as her eyelids grew heavy. Go with the knowledge that your sacrifice will bring peace. Tia tried to blink, but it was too hard. The strange words seemed to muddled and unfocused, like she was hearing them underwater. And she could feel herself dying, becoming slow and sluggish as the life was literally pulled out of her body. All at once, the world snapped back into focus as her body was allowed to fall to the sandy ground. Her breathing returned to normal as color once again pervaded the world. Looking up, she saw the man holding the hand he had been gripping her with him. And through the palm was embedded a small blade of metal connected to a tough thread. She looked around to see Matsuri with a determined expression on her face, holding the other end of the thread. She tugged out the metal dart, swinging the Johyo around her head before lashing out with it again. The man tried to grab the weapon as it flew through the air, but in an impressive display of control, Matsuri manipulated the dart, pulling it under the man's hand to securely wrap around his neck. Strangely, Tia fell back to 100% as if the man hadn't touched her at all. Sensing her opportunity, she forced as much lightning chakra through her staff as she could before squarely swinging it into the man's unprotected temple. While he was off balance, he took the blow full force, flying across the street as Matsuri released him in time. Tia smiled confidently at the large hole in the building. The man's body had made to swinging her staff once to place it on her shoulder. Matsuri jogged over, concerned for what she had seen when she arrived. It had looked like the man was pulling some sort of spectral wraith out of Taya's body. However, before she could make it over, she had to suddenly duck as a long black spike sailed over her head. Likewise, Taya was forced to draw her staff again to swat similar stacks from the air as the man pulled himself out of the wreckage of the storefront. Taya frowned when he didn't even look hurt. However, his eyes had narrowed imperceptibly. Ah, crap. Fu had similar sentiments as she darted through the streets, fitting between arches and buildings as her wings propelled her forward. She looked back only to immediately folding her wings, allowing herself to drop as the gruesome bird soared overhead, its mouth open in anticipation. She unfurled them again to suddenly turn back on herself, pulling a barrel roll to fly between a particularly narrow window. Once out the other side of the building, she pulled up, hovering for a moment to try and spot where her pursuer had gone. She saw the shadow descending on her in time to roll out of the way, lashing out at the last minute with the kunai in her hand. And she managed to get a solid gash down the creature's side, only to watch in surprise when it didn't disappear into a burst of smoke, and steadied it angrily rounded on her, with the figure standing in its mouth. Eyeing her warily. Fu sighed as she once again pulled her wings in, dropping down to avoid the bird as it tried to eat her again. Unfortunately, it seemed to have learned from its last mistake, and at the last moment, it pushed itself down with more speed that food could match while falling. Before she could open up her mouth again, and her wings again, she suddenly found herself enveloped by a dark, wet, and humid cave, nearly retching from the smell. She tried to look around, but was so swiftly punched in the gut by a very powerful fist, flinging her further into the terrible smelling cave. She impacted with a soft wall with a sickening squelch, making her gag as she felt her back get coated in some kind of slimy substance. Reacting on impulses, she ducked under another strong punch, not even sure how she reacted to it without being able to see. She dived to the side, sliding across the spongy but wet floor before kicking to her feet. Hoping she had a moment of respite, she began to concentrate, drawing on the chakra inside of her. Slowly, a cloak of bubbling yellow chakra began to appear over her body as the two wings on her back lost their frail, translucent appearance. Soon the entire mystic cavern was lit by Fu's beachy cloak. The fluctuating yellow light casting an eerie glow on the pulsating red walls. Her pure orange eyes opened wide in shock as she saw a rod of black metal come soaring at her. Reacting on instinct alone, she caught it, snapping the rod with one hand. So similarly, she caught the foot aimed at her stomach, flipping the short man back against the wall of the creature's stomach. Fu took a deep breath, and when she exhaled, a cloud of bright golden particles erupted from her mouth, covering the area in bright golden light. The man had to shield his eyes, but by the time he did, he was coated in powder. Phosphorus dust. Fu didn't even have to make a hand sign. With the mere thought, the particles all suddenly erupted into flames. Expecting the man to cry out in pain, having his entire body set alight, she was surprised when he simply fell to the ground, using the slimy substance over the floor to put himself out before he was too badly burned. He stood back up slowly, his eyes narrowed in a minute irritation as he rushed forward again. Fu quickly spun, her eyes outstretched to give her the appearance of a spinning top, as her body became a blur of motion. Already she was straining to maintain her chakra cloak. The angry and violent thoughts already trying to take over her mind. The man impacted on the edge of her spinning form, and taking one of her chakra-infused wings right in the chest, as he was sent crashing back into the wall of the stomach. The force would have been enough to put a crater in the wall of a building, but as it was, it proved enough to finally disperse the summon. It disappeared from around them, and quickly the smoke cleared to let Fu see the man dropping down below her. Apparently, the summoned bird had flown quite high up by the time it was dispelled. Fu finally allowed the chakra around her body to recede, gasping as the bubbling cloak slowly vanished. She winced. It was still painful to use and left her a bit weakened afterwards, but she couldn't deny how effective it was. The man tumbling to the ground far below them was evident enough. Naruto winced as he pulled back his hand, hitting the shawled man in front of him. Was like punching a metal pole. The man just grinned as he tried to punch Naruto. He blocked, feeling like he was defending against Toya's staff as he caught the next swing. He wasn't as surprised this time when the third arm suddenly shot out and he knocked it away with his foot. It happened again on the other side before a final two arms shot out of the robe, catching Naruto around the waist. His eyes opened wide as the robes around the man were shredded by what looked like a folding metal tail that reminded him of Sasori's Hyuruku puppet. Focusing his chakra, he felt his muscles twitch in response to the lightning coursing through them as he sent out a large burst of wind chakra through the Tenketsu in his front. He vanished from the man's grip just as the tail lashed through where he had been. Naruto smirked as he reappeared a few feet away before vanishing in a burst of unparalleled speed. Suddenly, the multi-armed man was assaulted from all sides, receiving powerful kicks that would have sent him skidding away if he hadn't immediately received equally powerful blows from the other side. He tried to lash out randomly to hit the attacker he couldn't see, but for Naruto, the attacks were slow, painfully slow. He dodged under another lazy swing before bringing his foot up and then down on the man's face in a powerful axe kick. He was actually flipped from the intensity of the attack, landing on his back as the ground underneath him cracked from the force. Before Naruto finished him, he was seen careening across the street to crash into a food cart. He emerged a moment later, covered in fruit, as he stared at the orange-haired man with the spiky hair, his arms lowering to his side. For the first time, Naruto noticed the distinct lack of a ring on the man's finger, and when he thought about it, none of them had him. Who are you? The man stood taller, and still keeping his features set in an impassive mask, while his strange eyes observed the blonde. I am the judgment of a god, come to teach the world of pain, so it may strive for peace. Naruto narrowed his eyes all at the gibberish, without understanding what he was talking about. This body is merely a vessel for a higher power. I am the Diva Path. The man that Naruto had been beating around the street stood up, using a few of his arms to push himself off the floor. I am the Surapath. Tia used her staff to deflect another strike from one of the strange black robes. Her opponent could merely produce from nothing out of his sleeves. She batted away, but not letting it touch her. Last time she had one of the robes scraped her, she immediately felt dizzy and off balance. She knew enough about chakra to know the materials somehow disrupted the flow of it in her body. She twirled her bow staff once before attempting to bring it down on the man's head. He caught it before turning to look at her. I am the human path. Tia snorted as she ripped her staff out of his hands, swinging around so it smacked him in the temple, once again throwing him across the street. I'm Tia. Nice to fucking meet you. Flew as fast as she could, twirling her body through the air in an attempt to beat her opponent to the ground. She passed him a few hundred feet above the earth, catching herself on her wings before spinning in the air, firmly connecting her foot with the back of his head. She stopped in mid-air. The force of Fu's blow enough to halt his fall momentarily. Fu used the opportunity to grab his arm, using it like a lever to swing her body around. Even as he turned to look at her, I am the human path. He didn't get any more time to speak as Fu's foot connected to his stomach, launching him towards the ground and faster. Whatever. Gar was doing everything he could to try and crush his two opponents, but they worked well in tandem. The larger one using his ability to absorb chakra to protect the other. His hand blocked yet another attack from the strange black rods they used before trying to swat the man away, even as it fell to the ground on ground uselessly. He was actually beginning to grow annoyed by opponents who had the kind of ability to absorb chakra, binding his sand together. It forced him to think of other ways to beat them. Suddenly both stopped looking at him strangely as the larger one spoke up. I am the Pratapath. Likewise, the more rugged looking one to his left side, another rod out of his sleeve. I am the Naraka Path. Naruto coldly observed them, narrowing his eyes at the odd behavior. I am the Godam Kazekage. The ground around the two of them erupted suddenly. And you will not leave my village alive. End of chapter 59.